we were supposed to meet down it's on California Street there, right near the pier. So I mean, that's basically where I spent that summer. It was like, you know, I worked some in the fields and I worked some at the dishwashing, but basically I spent that time at the pier and at the point surfing. And I had a, you know, cute little blonde girlfriend, and I joined the 90-day program, and then they called me. I wasn't supposed to go until in the summer. Then they called me and said, we're going Monday. You got to be there. So I was there at like whatever 0800 or whatever, and the recruiter put us in his car, 5 or 6 of us, and we, you know, got on the freeway, and there's the pier, and there's the point, and there's the waves, and my board's going to be there, and my girl, but I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be. I didn't really realize it was going to like. That was like the end of my innocence. You know, that was like the end of it. So.
My fellow Americans,
I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy.
100 men will test today, but only 3 win the Green Beret.
Rebels drove deeper into Laos today, pushing government troops.
Really, it was because I didn't have a job. That's really what was the driving force behind it. My father saw me sitting around. He'd come home from work. "What did you do today?" And I says, "Nothing." I said, "Well, you're not going to sit around. It's, you know, have a little bit of fun. You've had, you know, 2-3 weeks. Get a job." So I went out looking for work. Obviously, everybody had work. They weren't hiring anybody. So I kept looking and looking, and I don't know what made me go to the recruiters. And there was a recruiter station on A Street on downtown Oxnard. And got on my bike, went over there. I was 17 years of age, and they had the 4 branches there. And I was interested in the Marine Corps. I said, "It sounds like it would be fun," you know, at 17, I guess. But they weren't open. So I walked over to the Army, and they had a closed sign. And the Navy guy was too. And so, well, shit, you know. I started walking away, and this guy in a blue uniform shows up. He says, "Hey, can I help you?" And I go, "Nah, I'm just looking, you know, see what I can get from the military." "Well, come on in." It was a U.S. Air Force sergeant. So he made me a deal I couldn't refuse.
As we were processed that day, we got to a point where groups of us were, fairly large groups, were ushered into a large room, and it was indicated that the Marine Corps needed 20% of the enlistees for this go-around. They asked for volunteers, actually got some, and when they didn't get enough, they reached down and grabbed the top of the stack of folders, which we had been placing on the table as we walked in, and I was one of the last ones to walk in, and read off our names. So
we landed on Cameron Bay. At that time, it was just like a loading dock. There was nothing there. No airstrip, no Air Force, no. We just landed there, the dock, and we got off on the little LSTs, I guess, what you call them. You know, we just got there and we pulled off and we started marching. That was daytime. It was hot. It was hot, and what the hell am I doing here? You know, what's going on? You know, yeah. So we marched. Then I don't know. It was kind of weird because they said load your weapons, and then we marched down this road, man. And I don't know. I was kind of looking around, and I kind of think like, am I like a John Wayne movie or something? You know. You know, because, you know, it's just single file, you know, on both sides of the road, just walking down to where we're going to camp for the night, you know.
We were arriving just before dawn, and we were in the landing approach. I looked out the window, and this was, you know, maybe a couple mile or two from but there were tracers going all over the place. I said, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" You know, this is the, you know, the big city, and this is their big airport. And they're fighting out here only a mile or 2 from the airport, and that freaked me out. That was.
So you're in your blues, and now you're in Vietnam, and it's like April, man, it's hot, boom, humid, hits you just incredibly. And they put us in, so we got our sea bags, and they put us in a cattle car. They put us in a cattle car, got screens all the way around it, and it's like this, it's a cattle car. And then orientation. You know, first night we had sniper fire at the transit barracks, and then they went to orientation. One guy would get up and say, "This place is just as safe as home." And the next guy to get up and say, "Yeah, but anything you touch might be booby-trapped. So don't touch anything." All the women got venereal disease, killed the dogs, they're all mangy. You know, that kind of stuff. If you get the runs, don't write home for some response from your mama. Try to like just go to sick bay, because by the time that's going to take a month, get over a month, get back, and we don't have those ingredients. You just go to sick bay. And they said, for you country boys, there's 300, don't touch the snakes. There's 300 types of snakes in Vietnam, and 299 of them are poisonous, and the other one will swallow you whole. So don't touch snakes. Okay. Then we did our duty.
They need cooks. They don't need, that's what they want. Never took a cooking class in my life. But what got me was the 101st Airborne, so I raised my hand. And that's the first time I ever volunteered for anything. So they put me there, and I was with the 101st Air Mobile, okay? And we went to Vietnam, and we got to Camp Evans, and then I was working in the mess hall from that point on, and at that point, they took my infantry MOS away and gave me the MOS of a cook. But that's what I did over there, is never took a cooking lesson in my life.
I know the next night I was on guard duty. And you had to pull guard duty on the perimeter. So we had to go on the perimeter in a bunker. And my God, that's when it hit me. It was pouring rain. And you're outside in a poncho. You know, before they give you a little orientation, here's your password, what your procedures were, what's going on there at night. And I did my shift, and I think somebody had a radio, if I remember back. The 1967 World Series was going on between the Cardinals and the Red Sox. I'll never, somebody had a radio, so we were able to quietly listen it in the bunker. And after my shift was done, I had to go into the bunker to get some sleep. But the thing, it was just, you could see the rats coming out of I was mud up to my ankles. You had to get some. I went in the cot, went to sleep. And they woke me up for my next shift, but I said, what the heck am I doing here? It's just, God, 6 months ago I was home, I was at the beach in Ventura, it was in the middle of nowhere.
We were out on guard duty, and I looked out and we saw these little lights going on, and we fired, boom, 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 and the radio, what the hell's going on? We ended up being fireflies. I'd never seen a firefly. But you can understand an 18, 19-year-old there with a weapon in hand, live rounds, and seeing action out there. And it was like a domino effect in Vietnam. Once you started firing, everyone along started firing. And we can laugh at that now. We were on duty, on guard duty, and someone relieved us, and we went back, and we thought that was funny. We laughed. And war, I know you've heard this before. War is heck, but sometimes you find humor in it. You've got to find humor in order to keep your emotions and yourself sane.
We were on guard duty. This was at the battalion headquarters. The bunkers were set up around the perimeter of this whole facility there at a place called Monkey Mountain, just outside of Da Nang. There were trenches, sandbag line trenches that went to the different bunkers, so you had a time frame that you had your guard duty. Gary Ferguson and I had a stretch that we were supposed to do, and we had gone out there. And we were all of the bunkers are hooked together on a radio phone, and we were sitting there yakking with each other, telling jokes, whatever, trying to kill time. I had handed the radio phone over to Gary and backed out the entranceway and was in the trench just outside the doorway to the bunker. It was during monsoons, during the rains, to have a cigarette. And the only thing I remember is a bright light and a loud flash, and the sense of thinking I was up in a tree looking down at the bunker, knowing later on what it was I had been, the concussion from the hit had tossed me back through the air, so I see the bunker away from me. But Gary was killed. He was struck. The radio phone he was hanging on, he was electrocuted by the lightning strike.
We're in the Gulf of Tonkin in August and September and early October 1964. Then we went back to Japan, to refit, and then we hauled quite a few. We spent a lot of time hauling Marines from Okinawa, Japan, Okinawa, to either Vietnam, the Philippines, and then the Philippines to Vietnam. We'd haul them supplies. I remember one time we were loaded with ammunition all the way. The tank deck was full all the way to the ceiling. So that's about 300 feet by 30 feet up and 50 feet across, just pallets of ammunition. And we had pallets of gasoline on the flight deck, or on the main deck, which if we would have gone off, we would have gone halfway to the moon, I'm sure. Later in '65, we did the initial landing at Chu Lai, which was absolutely nothing there. And it was the biggest landing since Incheon. And we were, I think, one of the first 2 LSTs on the beach. And, we were expecting a lot of resistance, but nothing happened. It was an unopposed landing. I think the Vietnamese were totally surprised. Now, they got their act together that night, and they made a push to get us off the beach, but the Marines had already established a very good perimeter and held them off.
We went out and secured areas in the countryside each night, and then every day we came back in and let them have it back. And how it was done was, at least as far as my units and my personal experience, was a pair of tractors and a platoon of infantrymen would be assigned some area to go secure. And so sometime in the late afternoon, we would pull out from whatever center we were at, Hill 55, Marble Mountain, or Da Nang, or whatever, and drive out to that area. Usually just before sunset, we would stop. We kind of get our coordinates together, make sure our radio communications and things were working with our artillery and whatever behind us. Then shortly after dark, we would make a move of 100 or 200 yards that was predetermined to the spot that we were going to keep the 2 amphibious tractors together. And the tractors would go bow to bow, and they would sit there, and then the infantry platoon would go out and they would do their thing all night.
So one of the Marines come up to me and he said, Doc, you're always known as Doc. He said, our previous corpsman, when we'd settle in for the night, he'd come around and check up on us, make us take our boots off and check our feet and make us take our shirts off and look for boils and that kind of stuff. And he said, would you consider doing that? But it hadn't dawned on me. I didn't know what the hell it meant to be a field corpsman, And so I did it. And that's when I began to get to know my Marines. And I had a notebook and I wrote down every one of their names, the names of their mother and father, and their home addresses, including the company commander and my platoon lieutenant and the executive officer, because they would sometimes be in the field with us, as well as the gunny and the master gunny. And because I had a policy, if one of my Marines got hurt, I wrote their parents a letter. I'd wait a few weeks to try and give hopefully the Defense Department time to make contact with the family. But I would write and tell the parents what a great Marine they are, what an honor they are to their country, and the great service they have provided. And I got many letters back from the families.
We go back to Dong Ha and wait for some replacements for the guys that we lost. We were there a couple of weeks probably. And then they moved us up to the top of a hilltop, and I don't know what the number of the hill was. We were up there for about a month where we could see the whole valley again. That's the funny part. I don't remember getting up there. All I remember is being on there. I don't remember how we got down. But I asked my friend Larry, I said, how did we get down? He says, you don't remember? I said, no. He says, you guys walked down the hill of the mountain and you walked into the biggest ambush that we ever had. I don't remember the battle. All I remember is coming out of the valley.
We went into Da Nang for a few weeks till we got all of our equipment, and then from there we convoyed and moved up to Quang Tri, above Hue, and just not too far from the DMZ. We were probably 15 miles south of the DMZ, separating North and South Vietnam, and we built a camp called Camp Evans, and we shared that camp. We built our camp pretty fast. The Seabees got in there and built the base camp pretty quick, and we joined the 101st Airborne, which was already there. But most of my time was spent on the road the first 6 months, 5-6 months, until one of my best friends was killed convoying, and my company commander at that time suggested I come in and be the dispatcher for Alpha Company the last 3 months, which was really quite a reprieve from the pressures and the intensity of convoying constantly. When we were convoying, we were constantly with the fear of road mines and booby traps, and we were involved in several ambushes and sniper fire. It was quite intense.
It was constant search and destroy. They sent us in to clear out the DMZ, which was impossible because, you know, the North Vietnamese would come across the Van Hai River, wreak havoc, and then go back. When I was at Con Thien, I was on a 5-man killer team. And what we would do is we would wear camouflage, soft hats. We would go out for 5 days, 3,000 meters in front of Con Thien, and the most northern part of our troops, and we would be stealth and cause as much damage as we could.
The worst place we fought was this place called the Hip Duck Valley. The Marines had fought there first, then we fought there. We knew it was a bad place when we see, we're walking into the valley and we see a Marine tank with the turret blowed off, go up another couple hundred meters, see another Marine tank with the turret blowed off. Then we see one of our tracks, you know, APCs, that looked like, say, it was like silly putty for this, you know, like where the rounds had hit it all, and it was just like, you know, you get silly putty and and then there was a hole like this where the driver was. We knew this was a bad place.
Taking listening posts out. Listening posts are people you take out past your perimeter, outside of your perimeter, and basically they just hunker down someplace and hopefully stay awake all night long, and they're there to listen. To see if, for instance, if Charlie is setting up mortars, you can hear if they're connecting their mortar plate, setting up their rockets, launchers, and that. Also, if you hear any troop movement and stuff. And basically, they just sit there, hunker down, and report back to division anything they hear. And then I would have to go out, take them out, and come back, and then go out and get them and bring them back in. I didn't have to stay there because I was responsible for a section of the perimeter. Basically, I guess you could say it's like sergeant of the guard type of a thing, that I had 4 or 5 bunkers that I was responsible for and coordinating. And then also the times I would have to go outside with patrol looking for any tunnels that they try and get under our wire, or spider holes or anything like that.
When we were on foot, it was to get close to someone or to find a group, map them, count them, kind of weapons they had, not be seen, not be seen. You did not want to be seen. You did not want to fire one single bullet from your pistol or your rifle, because then you gave away your position. And we'd be out there in groups of 7 guys or 14 guys, and so we'd be on these missions. They take us in helicopters cruising around, and they'd bank at certain locations and keep driving and bank. And then one of those banks was our exit, so we'd jump out and that'd start our mission so that they didn't know where we were. Then we'd have, of course, areas where was our landing zone, our evacuation. And so, we'd do our mission for 2 or 3 days out there, whatever it was, 4 days, and then we'd call in and they'd come pick us up. We don't think about it. I had a couple of friends get killed in front of me that you don't think it's going to happen to you. And you kind of go on. You just want to survive. You want to do things that will keep you alive. Like I said, I became an expert at reading maps,
compass readings, calling in artillery or mortar fire, knowing where I was. We had a lieutenant that, when I first got to Lieutenant McGee, that was excellent. He was good. And we loved the guy and we followed him. His replacement, I don't even know his name, we called him Junior. And he was one of those 90 or 180-day wonders or something. And he didn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. So when he came on and we talked to him, he wanted to shout at us and you know, do all this. And we pulled him aside and told him, you know, when we're in camp, you're going to be the lieutenant. So when we're out there, we own you. Don't you ever try to give us orders. You don't know how to read a map. You don't know how to call in artillery. Said you don't know how to handle a firefight when you get attacked. You're supposed to herringbone and go in these directions, and you're trying to tell us to do it this other way because you studied it in a class somewhere. But understand, we'll frag you out there. And he didn't believe it the first time. And then we went out to the jungle on one of those missions with a whole platoon, and we were on the ground. We left our personnel carriers behind and we took off on the ground. And he tried to give some orders, and it wasn't correct. He wasn't following the plan. And so we took it from him, and we said, we even took all his rifle and his gun, took all his weapons, and we said, you're going to be naked out here because you're making us feel naked by the poor leadership and your poor knowledge of what we're doing and how it's done. And so we took him on that mission with us and came back, gave him his weapons back, and said, and after that he understood. When we were in camp, when officers and other people, he would give certain orders and we'd respond the way you're supposed to respond to an officer. But when we're out on a mission, he was not in charge.
I've been there like maybe not even 2.5 weeks. He said, prepare yourself because the guys are coming back. They've been there about what, 2.5 weeks. And they're coming back and all they do here is get drunk, get crazy and just talk a lot of shit. Your job with me is to give them anything they want. And he said, including prostitutes. Well, what the hell are you talking about? Well, all the Vietnamese that come into camp, you know, to do the laundry and the dirty work and the cleanup and all that, you know, some of those women are willing to go to bed with these guys, you know, and they pay them with whatever, rations, food, whatever. They come back and he told me, stay away from the captain. He's crazy. Stay away from him. And I said, okay, I know how to, understand. So I'm providing the booze and the beers. Nobody asked me for a prostitute, nobody, except the captain. And who does he want? He wants I think she was 15 or 16-year-old beautiful young girl that was there doing our laundry. And there was no way I was gonna go up there and ask her that he wants a prostitute, right? And I told the sergeant, he says, just stay away from him. He'll get drunk pretty soon and he'll forget. So every time I go around somehow, he'd see me and says, Gutierrez, get over it, cause me F this and F that, you know, you better bring me that young lady. Well, I didn't. I just disappeared. A few days later, when they're ready to pack out and go again for a few weeks, he said, oh, and he'd warned me that night before he went to sleep or knocked out. He said, you know, you failed me. When we go back, you're gonna go out. The next day or a few days later, the sergeant told me he probably forgot, just stay away from him. And he got all the guys ready to go and he said, where the F is Gutierrez? And he says, he's gonna go out with us. And that's why I ended up in the field, because I didn't get him the young lady that he wanted as a prostitute. See, those are the realities of war that people don't talk about. So I ended up on the field.
You know, you get a lot of noise back in the back, and I was really nervous because, you know, I'm walking in front and
You're by yourself?
We're in a column. We're in a column, and I'm probably, I'm probably 10 feet ahead of everybody, maybe 15 feet ahead of everybody, kind of picking through the brush. And so, as I start to walk a little forward, I can smell that it's like they're cooking, you know, like the smell of maybe food being cooked or something. And so I just stopped and I called back and I said, I think we got some people, somebody's up here. So the sergeant comes back up and he says, what's going on? I said, man, we got some stuff here because there's you can smell them. So he radios back to him and the guy says, so he says, he thought we were going to send in some gunships. And the lieutenant gets word that we have to find out to see if they're really there before we send in any kind of gunships, because we don't want to make them, I guess, run, because that's our whole deal that day was we were going to search and destroy these guys. So the sergeant says, well, I'll take half the squad this way and you take half the squad this way. And let's take it easy, though. We'll go slow. So I said, okay. So the guy started walking behind me this way, and he started walking this way, and fire, I get shot, and immediately I kind of pull this way because I got shot here, and my arm kind of pulls away from my weapon. And then he got shot, and he got killed that day. He got shot, and so the guys fall back, and the only cover I had was a tree in front of me. So I went forward, and so I fell behind the tree there, and then all shit broke loose, and they were waiting for us. They were set up, and they were ambushing us, actually, instead of us ambushing them that day. They sent the cable down, and me and another guy got on the cable, and they're still firing all over the place and shit. And they finally got us on the chopper, and then they sent the cable down again for 2 other guys, because we got hit pretty bad that day. And they pulled it up. And then when the chopper started to fly away, they were shooting at the chopper, and they shot the chopper down. So the clearing that I had told the lieutenant that was available, the chopper goes in that area, and it crash landed. And so they took us out of there. There was another medevac chopper that landed close by, and they grabbed us out of there, and they took us into the other chopper and finally flew us back into Benoit, where the hospital was. And it was one of those landings where, just kind of and just boom, and it hit hard. But they were able to land that chopper. We were very, very lucky. I tell you, it just wasn't my time, I guess, or my turn, because it was quite a day.
When the push was made to go into Cambodia, we were supposed to send a radio teletype detachment along with it. By that time, I was a sergeant, and pretty much the senior sergeant there, so I pretty much ran things as far as our commo was concerned. And so I was pretty sure that I was going to be sent with that, but I wasn't. And none of the basketball players went. Our company commander he really liked the basketball team. He loved the sport. He liked the team, and he really liked the attention he got from having that winning basketball team. So I really do think that being on that team and being the captain of that team kept me from going into Cambodia.
And then from Okinawa, then there would be a few crews assigned to Cam Ranh Bay. And so every month you'd have duty in Cam Ranh Bay. There was always a detachment of VP-22 pilots at Cam Ranh Bay with 3 or 4 airplanes. And we would fly up to the DMZ, which would be right up at the border between South and North Vietnam. And we would fly monitoring surface ships that would possibly infiltrate South Vietnam. And the operation was Operation Market Time.
We were on a base called Nha Trang. That was the air base, and that's where we were at, Nha Trang. It's on the coast. It's positioned perfectly for a lot of areas you could fly. Did we fly north? Yes. You asked me that question. North Vietnam? Yes. Did we fly into Cambodia? Yes. Did we fly into Laos? Yes. My understanding is we weren't supposed to be there, but we were. A lot of times, these missions that we flew, we'd fly in some real ugly runways, and usually just before the sun came up, so just enough light so you can land, because there were no lights. And you would extract soldiers, or sometimes you would fly and you would drop soldiers at 15, 20,000 feet. These soldiers didn't have names on their lapels. They didn't carry, or on their uniform. They didn't have rank. They didn't have, what branch of the service. Some of the weapons they carried were unique. You carry medevacs, you carry soldiers, wounded soldiers, deceased soldiers. You'd carry body bags with soldiers that were, it's tough. This is tough to say, but dismembered soldiers, you know. You don't know who they are. You don't know whether they're our soldiers or some other group of soldiers, or you don't know. And I saw death. I saw death like never before. It's not like, you know, watching a car accident. That's bad enough in itself, but these are soldiers that are fighting in a war, and you know, is somebody going to tell their parents or their loved ones that they died somewhere other than Vietnam, maybe? Or I don't know.
You know, look at the records and the argument. Our station was Mactan, which was a remote station in the southern Philippines. But we spent 22 days in country, usually in Tonsanut. But many times we were up country or sleeping in the airplane and eating sea rations. And that went on pretty steady in late 66 and 67. We were very familiar with all of the outposts. Wherever the C-130 could land, we were there. But as things got hot, more and more so, we had to learn and create more evasive techniques to get in and out of those places. Plus the Army started nicknaming the C-130 the mortar magnet. And it was because it was big and easy for the North Vietnamese and guerrilla forces to fire mortars in. And so we learned the techniques of pushing things off and doing bootlegger turns. You could back up with a C-130, which was a pretty interesting maneuver. The thing that changed for me, the dynamics mentally, was going into those short field strips to deliver ammunition supplies when body bags started showing up. And so we became an evacuation, medevacs. The helicopter was one of the main medevacs, but they would get back to at least a fairly safe area. We would then pick up more casualties there and take them to usually Cam Bay or Da Nang, where there would be medical facilities, and then they would be airlifted to usually a hospital ship offshore.
It was a hospital, and it was the 71st Evac hospital. I had missed, thank goodness, the real bad Tet Offensive of '68. And there was a nurse that died in that conflict. They had me assigned to med-surg, which wasn't my choice. So I kind of humbugged people until that I wanted to go to the emergency room. I finally got there, and I spent 6 months in the emergency room, 6 months in a 25-bed ICU. We had, I don't know, 3 or 4 casualties come in at the same time, and they'd been in a helicopter, and they'd been shot right through the bottom of their seats. And so they were mortally wounded. And you were supposed to call the chaplain every time you had casualties come in. And I guess we dropped the ball and didn't do that. And I just snapped at him and said, I thought maybe you might want something live to pray over. He didn't care for that line. And so then I was transferred to post-op, or this ICU. Yeah.
When I was a battalion surgeon, which I was selected to fill in for another battalion surgeon who attempted suicide, so they pulled me in, and I was there for a month until they got a regular full-time replacement. And we had gone into this base camp area, which is an interesting phenomenon because you would come in with helicopters to an area which they had previously selected and which they had just bombed and artilleried, and it was just a desolate area because no one could survive. So anyhow, we would go in there and would establish a perimeter, dig our little foxholes with some covering, and then they would have patrols go out for several days, and then they would all wrap it up and then go back to the base camp area and rest a couple days and do the same thing somewhere else. But there was a one night where we had come in sort of late and we really hadn't finished all of our establishing a secure perimeter, and that's when this North Vietnamese group hit us, and there were mortars incoming, and I remember getting called over for someone, and it said, what can you do? And this guy I felt around, and I felt the back of his head was just missing. It was just the mortar, the shrapnel just took out the back of his head. And at that point, the only thing you could do is give him morphine and minimize the pain, because he obviously couldn't survive even if he could get evacuated. And but the next morning there were enemies, soldiers. Their bodies were within the perimeter, so some of them had actually broken through the perimeter, and so that was maybe the only time I really had some degree of fear for my life.
One day, a Protestant minister comes looking for me, and they tell me, go on up there to that office, and they got to go in there. And so I go in there and report, and he says, you're going home today. And I said, no, I still got until, May. I still got a couple months. And he checks my name again, for sure. And he says, no, you're going home today. And he tells me, I hate to tell you this, son, but... And right when he got to that point, my ear heard the thump of a mortar, because you could hear it. And generally, you got less than a minute for that thing to slowly make its way over to where you're at. But I heard it, and he didn't. He wasn't used to it. And I says, we got to get out of here. And I said, follow me. And so we're running. And I'm running to a bunker where we could be safe. But I'm thinking, he's telling me, I hate to tell you this, son, but. And so I was thinking, he's going to tell me my mother died. And so we slid into this bunker, huddled in there, and he tells me, my father died. That's what he told me. And sure enough, I was going home that day.
I injured my back in Cambodia, and but because I already had extended 42 days, I figured they were going to keep me, and I didn't want to be in there anymore. So I came back, and then about 6 months later, I ended up like paralyzed from my waist down, so by the time I got my appointment to the VA, they went in. The guy says, "Oh," he says, "You know what? We took an X-ray. We don't see anything there. When you get paralyzed, come on back." And
I'm 100% disabled rated. Got a few years back for PTSD, and I've got a rating for soft tissue cancers from my docs and exposure from Agent Orange. I've got diabetes and peripheral neuropathy, all these things that I didn't know anything about till a few years ago. But I've been in therapy now for about 3.5 years for my PTSD. And in all honesty, the people I've been working with are in agreement with me that some of the issues probably are not psychological. They probably are physical from the concussions, because in my particular field, it happened a lot, and we're learning more and more about TBI, traumatic brain injury, and beginning to recognize it. As a driver or crew chief, yeah, I was 9 feet up on the top of the tractor, but I hit 5 mines in 18 months.
I do have to tell you, I think of Vietnam every day, and people don't say, how can you do that? I don't know. A smell, an air. I know the Sheriff's Department has a Huey helicopter, and I don't think that, for any veteran, that sound will ever go away. I can hear that sucker miles away. Even with hearing aids, I can hear that sucker miles away. Pop, 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 and it's flying over me and then going around the golf course. And as I say, that helicopter, that sound, that image, the smell, sitting here with you, of course I'm thinking of Vietnam, but not a day goes by that I do not think of Vietnam.
So I was sitting in an airport not too long ago, maybe about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And I was flying to LA. I think I was in Chicago. I can't remember the town I was in, but I was in the terminal. I was waiting for a flight to LA. And 4 soldiers were walking down the terminal. And a lady, not far from me, got up, walked over and stopped them as they were walking down the hallway, and started hugging each one of them and shaking their hands and thanking them for their service, and really made a big deal out of it. And immediately, I became very emotional, and I was sitting there and tears were flowing down my face. And to think about those emotions, yeah, I go, why not us? You know, why did we not get that? And not that they didn't do a good job. And I go out on my way to thank a soldier when I see him. And, but it's something that we missed, something that wasn't there.
I think there is a sort of a mythologic belief in the power of bombs, and I think that, and maybe an underestimation of the power of human spirit and human interaction. And I think that we, you know, when in doubt, we just bomb it.
That was GI Bill. I probably would not have been able to go to school without the GI Bill. So if we're thankful for something, and I'm also thankful that I was able to buy my first house without a down payment. So, a couple of twerks, a couple of things that we can be happy about. But that year in Vietnam, yeah, I can't say that I enjoy it. No, absolutely not. Am I happy to be alive here? You betcha. Am I sorry to see that there are over 58,000 names on the wall? You bet. You bet. And as I said earlier, every time I see a Vietnam veteran, I make it a point to acknowledge him or her.
If you're gonna send people over in harm's way, you better have a good reason. And if we have this exhibit here, we're gonna see exactly, you know, what reasons they proposed, and we're gonna be able to think about in the future, are the reasons good enough to do this to people in Vietnam, the soldiers that actually went there, and the people that lost their loved ones over there too, because you never recover from that, never. So yeah, it's good to have this.
My fellow Americans, I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy.
100 men will test today, but only 3 win the Green Beret.
Rebels drove deeper into Laos today, pushing government troops across.
advantage of the truce.
Lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could.